Hello and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Mike Voinovich, a member of CMC's Board of Directors, as well as the Office Managing Partner at BDO here in Columbus. It's great to see such a vibrant crowd today. So today, we are excited to have support from Columbia Gas of Ohio, Columbus Business First, and Steptoe and Johnson, each of whom have many friends and associates in the audience. We're really happy to have you here. So I'd ask that you'd help me please thank them and also welcome Dan Kriegmer, President and COO of Columbia Gas, to the stage to introduce today's forum.
Good afternoon. I want to start by asking two simple questions. For those of you that woke up this morning to a warm house and took a warm shower, how many of you thought of me? Not even my own team. I'm a little disappointed by that, but don't fret, tomorrow's a new day. And I promise you that Columbia Gas of Ohio will be there in spirit with you when your alarm clock goes off at the crack of dawn. So second question, and one that's a little more serious. How many of you, as you pulled into your condo, apartment, house, abode last evening, counted your blessings for what many would call luxury? How many of you thought about the strength of your community and the value or importance that that means to you or your family? I'll be honest, I didn't. Because so many of us today, with the economic prosperity that we find right here in our backyard, take those basic needs for granted. But if you read the front page of the Dispatch yesterday, you met a mother and her 3 young children who don't take that for granted and do consider safe, warm, and affordable housing a luxury. And Michelle, I'm certain that you read that article. In fact, lawyer math, I admit, but if you read the article, a staggering statistic, the Van Buren and YWCA shelters last week were 50% oversubscribed. And as I know too well in my industry, the cold snap hasn't even hit us yet. So that's why I'm proud of the work that Columbia Cares does through Columbia Gas of Ohio, such as our recent chairmanship of the Habitat for Humanity campaign here in Mid-Ohio to address affordable housing, as well as the United Way Workplace campaign that will focus on the Linden area. And I'm also proud to welcome our speakers here today who are doing something about these important issues in our community. So I know that you will join me in welcoming Assistant Professor of City and Regional Planning at the Knowlton School at The Ohio State University, Jason Reece, our host and beloved journalist at WBNS 10 TV, Tracy Townsend, and of course, our Honorable Mayor of the City of Columbus, Andrew J. Ginther. Jason is going to start us off with opening remarks, and Tracy will lead the conversation with Mayor Ginther. Jason, the podium is yours. Thank you.
Just starting my timer here. Brevity is not something college professors are known for. So I have the wonderful opportunity to share with you some good news about our city, as well as thinking through some of the challenges and opportunities as we move forward as our neighborhoods continue to transform. Quick, you can just shout it out. Anybody know where this is in the city of Columbus? Just yell it out. Linden, I heard Linden. What if I told you that was a short north? About 30-some years ago. We are a city of tremendous neighborhood transformation, a remarkable asset for our community, a reflection of many of the good things that we have going on here in Columbus. We have reversed the half-century-long trend of disinvestment in the core of our city. Disinvestment that wasn't necessarily a natural product of the market, but impacted deeply by a lot of flawed federal housing policies from the 20th century. And so as we see this reinvestment in the city of Columbus, we still have some challenges, right? And you look on the right-hand side of the image over there, you'll see all of our land bank properties. And what I want you to think about is we are in a process of transformation that was really stalled out by the housing crisis and all those subprime loans. And we had certain neighborhoods that were deeply impacted by that. The good news is that those neighborhoods are starting their own transformation and moving away from much of the damage done by the housing crisis. So, speaking to some great analysis done by my colleagues at the Kirwan Institute, or former colleagues, as well as work done by the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, they recently analyzed neighborhood change here in Columbus. And to give you a quick snapshot of what you're looking at, green and blue is good, right? These are the areas where we see a lot of growth, we see a lot of positive change in neighborhoods. And I'll just kind of walk through some areas that may not surprise you. Wyland Park, the Near East Side, the South Side, Franklinton, and even up in Linden. And we'll talk more about Linden here in a second. But even on the hilltop, where we still have a lot of challenges, we do see some positive movement forward in some areas. So for this next generation of neighborhoods that are going to transform our Lindens, our hilltops, what I want to suggest to you is that this transformation is going to be built around partnership and assets. Right? This is how neighborhoods go through this process of revitalization in today's complex world and complex economy. So if you think about a neighborhood like Linden, a neighborhood that is, from my perspective, filled with assets, and those assets, in leveraging those assets and producing kind of catalytic benefits to the Linden neighborhood through our investment in those assets, that's the way that we will transform the Linden community. So again, just want to provide you a little bit of data and information to maybe counter some of the opinions that you might have about the Linden area, because what I may suggest to you is that neighborhoods that are about to go through transformation, most of us don't see it, right? We have the bias of now. Right? We see the neighborhood as it looks, but don't see those undercurrents underneath the community that are actually starting to show us what the future may look like. Talk about improved neighborhood safety as a result of the Safe Streets program. Talking about housing market recovery in Linden. And Linden was probably hit hardest by the housing market crash than any other neighborhood in this city. But even in Linden, we're starting to see that recovery happen. We're seeing investment in affordable housing. We see a market for affordable workforce rental housing in Linden. And neighborhood transformation will be dependent on the most important asset of our communities, which is an engaged population. Civic engagement is critical to the transformation of these communities going forward because, again, it's the buy-in, it's the blood, sweat, and tears of those many individuals, organizations, and the institutions within the neighborhood that really are going to push that trajectory forward in a very incremental way. So I want to highlight just to give you an idea of the scope of engagement in Linden right now, and I'm only going to scratch the surface. I'm going to miss so many activities, but you think about the great work of the United Way's Leadership Academy and the work of Delana Scales in leading that effort to develop a new cohort of leaders in Linden. You think about, and I really want to, thank you. Acknowledge Delana. You think about the tremendous engagement efforts, and I must acknowledge the work of the Neighborhood Design Center, who approached neighborhood planning for Linden in a way that should be a model for neighborhoods across the country. 14 months of engagement, dozens and dozens of meetings, more meetings than I can even imagine, that they've had the opportunity to embed themselves in pop-up engagement activities, ongoing work with the Leadership Academy, things like the Linden app that is digitally engaging folks in the community as part of Celebrate One's efforts. This is a phenomenal transformation, and these are the undercurrents of it, right? It's this leadership that's emerging in the neighborhood in collaboration with leadership from the city, leveraging those assets in the community, and you will see Linden go through this transformation just like many of our other neighborhoods who have done so in the past. I want to close on one last comment, and it really comes back to the importance of this conversation today. When we think about neighborhood transformation, we have to kind of throw out much of our old models, right? I'm going to call this neighborhood transportation 2.0, right? Maybe 3.0. We are in a time period now where we know we don't just let the market run wild, right? Because we actually can see the long-term trajectory of that when we look at push out and displacement from particular neighborhoods. And what I might suggest to you is at a larger scale, as more neighborhoods transform, that leads to a number of big challenges for our city in terms of social equity, racial equity, but also in terms of sustainability, right? Can the folks who are the lifeblood of the economy of Columbus still afford to live in our many great neighborhoods? And so that's why I'm going to suggest to you that we can be bold and we can do things differently. And actually, we have a new model, and we're kind of setting that standard here in Columbus. Many neighborhoods like Wyland Park that has been going through this process, trying to preserve affordability, creating a community of choice. Or if we look at the South Side, and to put up the graphic there from Nationwide Children's efforts on the South Side, where in their first target zip code, they've managed to stabilize the housing market. They've reduced vacancy rates by 25%. And according to recent data that I've actually been analyzing, the neighborhood actually grew more diverse during this time period, not less. Folks living in that neighborhood are more stable now than they were in the past. And that's because affordability and a variety of affordability choices was a bedrock of that redevelopment strategy. And so with that, I'm honored to transition the conversation over to Tracy, and I look forward to this great dialogue today. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Jason. So, Mr. Mayor, you made a little bit of news on this last night.
Yeah, we had a great community meeting. A lot of the community leaders from Linden are here that joined us last night as we shared this with the community. An exciting time. I'm grateful to the residents of Linden. They've engaged in a process for 14 months, and as many of them said to me at the very beginning, that we've been part of plans and studies before. We want a commitment for action, and so it was important for us to be investing in Linden while this planning process was taking place to clearly demonstrate that we were serious about this and that we needed their guidance to give us a blueprint, a roadmap. The last thing any neighborhood wants is City Hall or any other government entity dropping into their neighborhood and telling them how things were going to be and what was in their best interest. And so I'm grateful to the residents and leaders of Linden. This is their plan, One Linden, and the city is committed to helping them implement it.
And this is a plan that's going to take some time.
Yes.
And so we've heard it's bold, we're going to do things differently. Can you talk about the lessons that you've taken from the prior plans? We've heard a bit in Jason's presentation from the South Side, Wyland Park, and how that played into or how that will play into what we'll see in Linden.
Well, I think all of the strategies and 10 big ideas really are rooted in family, stability, and resiliency. When you think about the fact, just in Linden, here are a couple of stats, and we'll move off the stats and talk about the plan moving forward. But it's important for us to remember that high point of population for Linden back in 1960 was 26,000. It's now 18,000. Just in Linden, there were 1,600 evictions filed. There are only 18,000 people. And let's say that the average household is 3 to 4 people. So 1,600 evictions filed just in Linden. That is a clear and present danger to family stability and resiliency. And so I'm grateful for the Women's Commission work and so many in this room to helping us figure out how we reduce the amount of evictions to stabilize families. And the median household income is just under $24,000 in Linden, when our city's median income is at $48,000. That is a threat to family stability and resiliency. And so these big ideas are comprehensive, all-encompassing. They're not things that fall into neat little buckets around transportation or housing. It really is connected to the overall quality of life and vitality of the neighborhood. Making Linden safer doesn't just mean more police officers. Right. It means the safe streets that's been led by Commander Knight that we now have taken to 2 more neighborhoods, utilizing and leveraging the largest bike patrol of any division of police in the country in proactive community policing, building relationships, building trust. There's been a 30% drop in violent crime in Linden since the Safe Streets program started. It's part of this neighborhood comprehensive safety strategy that we're implementing to make sure that all of our neighborhoods are safer and stronger. But there are great lessons learned from Wineland Park, from the Near East Side with Pat, with the South Side. We've leveraged the Columbus way, public-private partnerships for economic development, for downtown revitalization, and we've gotten great national and international attention for that. Why wouldn't we leverage the same public-private partnership, the Columbus way, for neighborhood development? And doing everything we can to make sure that every family in every neighborhood is sharing in the Columbus success story. And Linden's personal to me. Sometimes people say, why? Why Linden, why now? Right. I grew up here, went through Columbus City Schools, and went to Brentnell and Dominion and Whetstone during a time when the district was still busing. So many of my classmates, and still to this day some of my best friends, grew up in what's now Rosewind, used to be Windsor Terrace, Milo Grogan, Linden, Brentnell, Woodland Holt. So these are folks in neighborhoods that I've been in for all 43 years, in and out of Linden, and know of the great resiliency and strength of the people of Linden. The people of Linden, not only does this community, I believe, owe this neighborhood its investment, its commitment over the long haul. We as a community could learn an awful lot from the people of Linden.
Like what?
I think strength, resiliency, focus, determination, an ability when resources are scarce and it feels like the rest of the community, and in some cases the outside world has turned its back on them, they forged on and they have not given up. And so I really believe that this is a time for us as a community to lean in to Linden, not walk away. And that includes the private sector, the public sector. And I'm so grateful for so many of the partners that have already stepped up. When I say my top 3 priorities are neighborhoods, 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 I've had folks raise their hand and say, how can we get involved? How can we invest? In Linden specifically, we've already got Huntington Banks, we've got Georgetown, we've got Habitat for Humanity, Pizzuti, all these great private sector and nonprofit partners, the Y and Battelle, who have all committed significant resources to start this work. And this plan is going to be a great roadmap, blueprint, but also challenge to the community overall of what way you, your company, your organization can get involved in helping us get this done.
Do you think it's going to be an opportunity to bring in some newer names? Because many of the companies that you named, we are all familiar with.
Yes. And there may be one particular anchor or a couple of champions. We saw that in Southside and Wineland Park. Linden, the Hilltop, our other opportunity neighborhoods, it's going to take the entire community. There's not going to be there's not one major employer in Linden the way there is Nationwide Children's Hospital, now the largest children's hospital in America on the south side. There is no employer like that in Linden. And so we're going to take a lot of companies, nonprofit organizations, and schools and the city working together to make this happen.
I want to go back to what you were saying about evictions. You know, as a mother, I was thinking about just the transient issues for, you know, moms, dads with their kids in schools. What are there big ideas around families and just keeping some consistency for kids and their education, because we know that's so important to a child's success?
Yeah, you know, having a predictable, stable environment is absolutely critical. And so those 1,600 evictions aren't just individuals. Those are families that are being turned upside down and potentially not only moving out. This isn't like where folks kind of pack up your things and help you load into a moving truck. This is your stuff's out on the curb and your life's been turned upside down and you may or may not have another place to live. And by the way, if you have an eviction on your record, it is much harder, especially in today's market, to find any other place that will rent to you. And then do you end up in the shelter system with a family shelter system that is overwhelmed right now, partly because of market pressures around affordability and the fact that there are many landlords who have such great demand for their housing can pick and choose more selectively who they rent to. And once that eviction becomes part of your record, it follows you for the rest of your life. Matthew Desmond writes about it and compares particularly the way it impacts women of color, that incarceration is to African American men what evictions are to African American women. And you look at Linden, and it's a great microcosm of the challenge before us. We have to reform the way evictions are handled in this community. We've got to reduce the amount of eviction filings, but we've also got to challenge tenants and landlords to change the way that they interact and deal with each other. This is not just a landlord problem. We have tenants in Linden, and we heard about it during the plan, and that's why that's part of the plan, creating new programs to support landlords and tenants to step up and meet their responsibilities and obligation to the community.
All right. How are you going to keep the folks in Linden who call it home involved in this process? Because it sounds like this is not something we're going to see resolved anytime soon. It's a long process.
Yes, but there are things that are going to happen, and that are already happening. The city's made this, $20 million plus commitment to envision the Linden Community Center, and have set up a new foundation to engage private partners in helping to build that out. We've already got the Linden Pre-K Center that's providing high-quality learning opportunities, preschool opportunities to 100 children right now. We're hoping to double that in just the next couple of years. They're renovating the second floor and hoping to have that open. We are looking, the work that the Y is already doing, Habitat for Humanity. I think it's 200 homes, $10 million is significant investment that Habitat for Humanity has already made, and what Huntington is doing in the area of lending to small businesses, entrepreneurs, and homeowners to make improvements in their homes. The way you keep folks, you've got to show results. And for me, at the end of the day, did we raise incomes, reduce poverty, stabilize families, and improve the quality of life of Linden? That's what I will look back upon, not a certain infrastructure project, or what is the quality of life and the standard of living and the stability of families. Because at the end of the day, that is what makes great neighborhoods. And only great neighborhoods make for a great city.
So a green dot on Linden on next presentation?
Absolutely. Lots of green dots.
Lots of green dots. So how can people who don't live in Linden, I'm thinking volunteer organizations, community groups, those kinds of entities, be a part of the plan, and why would they want to be?
Well, I think the why is very simple. Obviously, it's personal for me. But if you think about it, if 2/3 of the city is doing better than we've ever done before, but 1/3 of us have been left out of that success story, we're going to grow by another 1/3 over the next 20 or 30 years. We have this incredible opportunity. If we lift up and invest and follow the lead of the people of Linden and the Hilltop and our other opportunity neighborhoods, the next 20 years could be some of the most exciting and dynamic, inclusive growth and shared prosperity that this city has ever seen. But if we don't, the divide widens and it deepens, and it becomes much more challenging for our children to fix it. So we can either grow the way our values guide us and the way that we know is best based on the research and the evidence, but it will require political will and a long-term commitment. I think as Dr. Reece pointed out, we didn't end up here overnight. It is going to take a sustained, ongoing, committed effort. But there is progress that we can be making every day in Linden and other great neighborhoods if we have the political will and a commitment to the people of these neighborhoods. I would say that there are so many things that are already happening in Linden. I would encourage folks that aren't currently involved to figure out, where they can lend, where they can be a champion, either in financial resources, people power, and volunteers. We want folks resources. We want money. This is going to take a collective investment. But we also want people to be personally involved. We want them to in-kind professional services. We want the private sector. We want the architecture and development community to be involved. Leverage your networks and your circles of influence to get more people involved and to be personally connected to this work. Checks and cash is important. This is not cheap. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask for the people of Columbus's personal commitment and involvement in this work.
All right. We're going to put a little bit of a placeholder there and just remind everybody that we are going to move to audience questions in just a few minutes. And so there is a microphone over there. I'm doing my Blake Shelton point over there. And so we just ask you to step over to the microphone and don't be shy. We love questions. I do want to go back to what you were saying, Mayor Ginther, about the personal commitment and have you talk a little bit about that. Because it seems to me that if you don't live in Linden, you might really need to subscribe to what I've heard you talk about is the Columbus way to really care about this, because it is going to take a bit of time.
Well, and for us too. I mean, Shannon and I are raising our daughter in Clintonville. The only thing that separates us from our neighbors in Linden is this little interstate. But what we see every day in Clintonville is not what we see every day in Linden. And so it's a constant reminder for me and for us that if we are going to become what I envision as America's opportunity city, then infrastructure should not divide us, and opportunities should not belong to those who live in the right places. And that's why mobility is such a big part of this plan. Restorative infrastructure is such a big part of this plan. Leveraging, it's really a strengths-based approach. I mean, there may be folks, shared some of the statistics earlier, and maybe that's depressing. I needed to frame it and have folks understand what our neighbors in Linden are dealing with and facing every day. But there are a lot of assets. And Jason mentioned those. The housing stock, the capacity. You have a situation where literally the population of Linden could double and no one would be displaced. There are not many neighborhoods like that, certainly in our city, and I would argue many in the country. I mean, we could bring 500 market rate homes on board tomorrow in Linden. The infrastructure is there. Certainly the strength of the community and the neighborhood, the leadership of the residents. Linden is open for business. But it's going to take our collective effort because we need to continue to make Linden safer and stronger, make strategic investments both in education and in infrastructure, and make sure that we continue to focus. This is why Linden's been such a top priority for me with our Smart Columbus program. And so not only the CMAX and the work with CODA, but really making sure that these mobility hubs that will be coming online, that will start in Linden, are connecting folks to transit options, to the things you and I take for granted. Healthcare,
right?
Fresh fruits and vegetables, jobs, high quality childcare. I believe that mobility is the great equalizer of the 21st century, and I don't think there's any place where that is more evident than Linden.
And mobility, you said fresh fruits and vegetables, a grocery store. I'm sure they'd like to have
Absolutely.
a grocery store.
And it may be different than the traditional big box grocery store, but all the market analysis and research done and input from the community, we think there's a right one. Maybe it's not Kroger or Giant Eagle, but maybe it's a Lucky's or a Whole Foods or a different type of neighborhood grocery store that could work. Particularly the plan lays out. South Linden might actually have more of a market force and demand than North Linden, where Kroger just left Northern Lights. But it's an ongoing issue. And that's why the farmers market was so important that we started this year, that was so hugely successful. Who all went to the Linden Farmers Market this summer? I mean, it was a great community gathering place and place to access fresh fruits and vegetables, and a place for neighbors to connect.
So you need that process to already be starting, because we need to be healthy as we.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I don't see anybody walk. Oh, I do. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. So I have another thing that I have to say. It is CMC's tradition to take audience questions. And friends, we ask that you state your name and ask your question. In fairness to all, we'd like to get as many questions as possible. That means please avoid all editorial comments and questions. I would like to remind you, end with a question mark. Don't have an editorial comment and put a question mark on it. Let's get started with our first question, please.
Yes, my name is John McKnight, and I just have a long editorial comment to make.
The council president's right over there.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the gentrification or how that's going to be avoided. I live in Clintonville as well, and I'm very familiar with the Linden area, and I would love to see it thrive more and improve in all the things that you're talking about. But I'm having a hard time seeing how that's going to happen without pushing out some of the small business owners that open their businesses there because that's where they can afford them, and the homeowners that are going to be affected by the inevitable rise in property taxes as the values go up and things like that. So if you could help shine a little bit more light on that for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and one that we're learning a lot more about. We haven't always gotten it right. I think we have some better examples where we've been able to deal with that, and Dr. Reece talked a little bit about these and mentioned these. I mean, when you look at what's happening on the south side, the Near East side, and in Wineland Park, I think those are all informed public-private partnerships that have evolved, and we've learned from them, and we're hoping to use those lessons. Linden is a little bit different, as I just mentioned. I mean, literally, we could double the population there, so it's not an issue of people being forced out right away, but I think you raise a fair point, and it reinforces why we really need to go from being a land bank community to a land trust community. And so we're really hoping to learn from a partnership on the Southside Renaissance Fund that's being headed up by Reverend Edgar and Nationwide Children's Hospital, that's working to get a significant amount of units revitalized, renovated, maybe some built new, but predominantly improving the housing stock on the South Side, but making sure that it stays affordable. The last thing we want to do as a community is invest tons of resources from the public and private sector to only have affordable housing today become an incredible profit for a developer or an owner 10 or 15 years from now, and that housing disappears. And by the way, then it's twice or three times more expensive to build more affordable housing in a neighborhood where the market and private sector is invested. So that's going to be an important transition. But we also have to figure out how we keep seniors. The number of seniors in this community is going to double in the next 20 years. And so thinking about how folks on fixed incomes, retirees, but also working people are able to stay in their homes as their property values rise. And I know that this is already impacting folks in Milo. And so there are some partners already trying to dig into this and trying to figure out how we can make sure folks can age in place. And then people who have lived in neighborhoods for generations are able to stay there and benefit from the collective prosperity.
Thank you.
My name is Ann Hughes, and I have a similar question. Are you requiring developers to maintain a certain percentage of more affordable housing as they invest in the city?
Yes, so appreciate the question. We actually studied as a city for the first time ever the incentives we were offering, how they were offering, how we were offering it, how we were leveraging it to help us meet our public policy goals. And so that study helped us change the way that we've offered incentives in the community, with our primary focus, our guiding light being mixed income neighborhoods. We believe that mixed income neighborhoods make for the strongest, most stable, dynamic neighborhoods, and those are the types of neighborhoods that make a good city a great city. And so ultimately, incentives and abatements are the public's money. If they weren't going back to the developer, they'd be going in to help pay for cops and firefighters and health workers and rec staff. So if we're using them and leveraging them, they ought to be helping us meet our public policy goals. And clearly, that's mixed income neighborhoods and affordable housing. So depending on the neighborhood, there will be different incentives offered. So there's some neighborhoods where they are not going to receive abatements and incentives that they had in the past because, quite honestly, the market doesn't require it or demand it. But there are going to be other neighborhoods like Linden and other opportunity neighborhoods where we know it's not going to just be an abatement. It's also going to be infrastructure. It's also going to require maybe strategic land acquisition in order to get the private sector to invest into a market that, quite honestly, a lot of financing entities wouldn't support without those additional parts of the proposal. But yes, anytime that we are offering incentives and abatements anymore for residential development, we're looking for 20% of the units to be part of affordable housing. Everybody here knows we've got about a 54,000 unit shortage of affordable housing in this county. And our goal is to use incentives and abatements to help us meet that demand and that need, because affordable housing is going to be absolutely critical for the future of this city over the next 20 years. And you only have to look at Charlotte, Atlanta, Denver, Seattle to see what happens. We have time, but not much time. And the next 20 years will dictate where this city goes, I believe, over the next 100.
My name is Lois Ferguson. I am a 20-year resident homeowner in the Linden area, And when you're speaking about the racial difference between renters and homeowners, and then trying to get the word out to the people who rent to people and the people who are the renters, how exactly is that being done? And how could we as residents get that word out to others so that we can get that process moving?
Well, I appreciate the offer, and you've been intimately involved in putting this plan together and engaged and an incredible advocate in Linden, so thank you for that. I think it's an important point that you make. Both landlords and tenants have to step up what they're doing. We believe that mixed income neighborhoods also means we have mixed use, that we have renters, that we have single family homeowners, we have folks that own condos. And we believe what's laid out here in the plan will provide additional resources and services for both landlords and tenants. But we're going to need property owners like you and business owners in the community helping us to reach folks to make sure that they take advantage of those and that we're able to leverage those for more stability in the Linden neighborhood.
Hi, Greg Lee. I'm an East Side resident and MAC member. So on the East Side, we've got quite a big delta between the top end and the bottom end of incomes and housing stock and housing values. And one of the things that we've noticed for your mixed income neighborhoods directive is that some of the folks on the top end don't feel the same sense of community as the folks on the bottom end across like the whole neighborhood. So what ways can we continue to engage some like folks on the top and the bottom end to expand their sense of community?
That's a great question. I think it takes purposeful and intentional leadership. Putting folks in situations and opportunities to interact with folks maybe differently from them, maybe outside of their comfort zone or their block or their specific neighborhood. And the city stands ready, willing, and able to do that. And one of the reasons that we created the Department of Neighborhoods is exactly for what you're talking about. And Carla Williams-Scott and her team, particularly Nick Bankston, I want to acknowledge them for all their incredible work on this Linden plan because but our thought was if we thought it was important enough to create a one-stop shop for folks who wanted to build and develop in Columbus with building services and the like, why wouldn't we create a one-stop shop for neighborhood and community leaders that were committed to improving the quality of life of their neighborhoods? And so we stand ready, willing, and able. I think there are other great resources out there with the United Way, the Columbus Foundation, and others. But we'd be very interested in working with you and trying to figure that out. It is a constant reminder, Maya Angelou, America's poet, still teaches us that we have that we are much more alike than we are unalike, and the more we can be guided by that and understand that, everyone deserves to have a sense of place and belonging in every neighborhood throughout this city. And so, appreciate the question. Appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Hello, Sunday Corner, a longtime South Linden resident and founder of Linden Direct, which is a community engagement organization. I'm hearing you speak in reference to privatized funding and individuals coming within the community, and I guess I have a twofold question. One being, with the privatized funds or builders, that sort of thing, are they going to have MBE and EDGE initiatives? And then if so, will there be something additional that will go with that for hiring within the South Linden community? Because MBE and EDGE doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be from within the community. But then additionally, once those homes are built and that sort of thing, how are we going to overcome possible redlining or the inability of individuals being able to take advantage of that by getting loans or funding for those particular properties?
All great questions. I'm going to do my best to answer all of those. First of all, the city's going to lead by example with respect to minority and female participation. We're in the process of putting in place a community benefits agreement around the construction of the new Linden Community Center. We just announced one for Fire Station 35 on the Far East Side on Wagner Road, and that specifically is opening up opportunities to women and minorities. Our thought is if they're paying for the center, they ought to participate in helping to build it and develop it. And so opportunities both in building and construction trades, but also architecture and the planning and design. And I know Pizzuti, who is helping to in-kind a lot of the planning and design, is doing exactly what you're talking about already, and I know is committed to that moving forward. We're going to continue to do that as a city. We've done that with Blueprint. We're doing that with Smart Columbus and a lot of our other work. And we're going to continue to work with the private sector to make sure that the people of Linden are benefiting from our community's collective investment into the neighborhood. I would say that Huntington has already led the way with respect to financing and lending, and they've earmarked, I've forgotten the dollar amount, it's a significant amount of resources both for small business, entrepreneurship, home ownership, and home improvement. So that would be the place that I would start on the financing side, and I'm sure that all the great banks that we have in this community, all folks that we all do business with, would be happy to follow the Huntington's lead in opening up more financing and lending so that we can get more owners of property and businesses in Linden, to match up with what we're going to be doing with residential and tenants and renters.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'm Lucia Y. Thank you for all of this for Linden. It's really amazing. The thing I haven't heard much about, and I was just wondering, is about you have the criminal issue in Linden that makes. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to figure out how to say this, but there's in our time, in the 21st century, I think there's an epidemic of a spectrum of mental health issues. And I think a lot of what we see in Linden is considered criminal issues, but they're actually mental health problems. And it creates so many problems, not just in terms of actual actions, crimes, but the whole streets can be affected by one particular resident or area. And from what I understand, I do live there, and whenever I've addressed it with the police, they are completely don't know what to do. They mention that there is a lot of this particular problem, but it hasn't come up much that I've heard when you were talking about things to change. And I know it's something across the country that doesn't seem to be addressed. It doesn't seem to be anything anyone knows about. I was just wondering if it's on your agenda.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the question. Mental health and wellness is a direct impact on the quality of life of the neighborhood. Certainly, the stability and resiliency of a family. And so you'll find our trauma-informed care approach really rooted in everything from our violent crime review group to our neighborhood emergency response, all part of our comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy. I mean, this is making neighborhoods safer, and Linden in particular is not a policing issue. We cannot rely on the division of police to make our neighborhoods safer. We all have a role to play in that. And so, if we can provide more information for you about the comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy, but it really has recreation and parks and health and public service and transportation and development and safety all working together with the community. And this Safe Streets pilot that Commander Knight and her team have been working on has really made a difference. in information sharing, with intelligence gathering, but also trying to connect some people to services before something more dangerous or violent or confrontational takes place. But we'd be happy to talk to you more about it. I think Dr. Roberts is here from the Department of Health, who is doing leading a lot of this work, but we'd be happy to talk to you more about that.
We're going to have time for just a couple more questions, and we'll have to make sure that
shorter answers.
you give shorter answers. All right, go ahead.
Good afternoon,
my
Mayor
daughter was here for a
Ginther.
second.
I'm Lawrence Calloway, South Linden Area Commission Chair. And my question, when looking at redevelopment and looking at housing and making Linden a viable opportunity, one of the things that's coming up that's not really being mentioned is about our educational system, our schools. Mm-hmm. And right now, Linden is facing possible displacement of its high school. And I speak on this because when you look at Linden, you're looking at its school, its educational institution as part of its culture, its history. And when you have residents concerned about the redevelopment of the community, they're looking at not only as what is being brought in, they're looking at what is being taken out. So how do we go about addressing this issue with our educational systems, not only with our high school, but with our elementary schools also?
Great question. Do I still have to speak quickly? I don't know how I tackle this question quickly. I'll put it right where it's at. I talked specifically about Linden McKinley High School. I've heard about this all during the year and heard again last night about it at St. Stephen's. No one understands the difficulty and complexity of closing schools like I do. I had to do it several times as a school board member. It's a difficult, complex challenge for our board members to deal with. But 14 months and hundreds of community residents, dozens and dozens and dozens of meetings, and this comprehensive plan, I believe would be undermined with the closing of Linden McKinley High School. There's no, this is a comprehensive neighborhood plan, but I spoke with the school board president this morning and I told him that I would certainly be asked about this today. I am going to continue to work with the district, advocate on behalf of having that important community center remain in place, but I will also do this. I will challenge the people in this room. I mentor every Tuesday at West High School on the Hilltop. All of us are busy, but if we make the children of Linden a top priority, think of the difference that we could make there. So I ask you to think about how you can personally get involved in the lives of the young people of Linden and act on it. We need to make sure we're stepping up to support the school district moving forward. In the classroom, after school, in the summer, providing meaningful internship and work opportunities for young people, and supporting our board as they make very difficult decisions.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to make this quick. My name is George Walker Jr. I'm one of the community leaders in South Linden. Ditto. That's exactly what I wanted to ask.
How about that?
Well done. Well, thank you to our speakers. I hope you found today's forum enlightening. It sounds like we are on the cusp of something great, but it's obviously going to need all of our engagement, and hopefully today will allow you to reflect on what that may be in your own lives. But before we conclude, let's thank again the Columbus Business First, Columbia Gas of Ohio, Steptoe, and Johnson for their support, as well as our speakers, Jason Reece, Tracy Townsend, and the Honorable Mayor Andrew Ginther. And thanks to all of you for being here. We look forward to seeing you next week.